Okay. Well, we want to welcome everybody to the Carter Policy Committee meeting today, 3 days after my birthday. So, can I get a motion to accept the agenda as sent out?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda will be accepted. All in favor, say aye.
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 I did not see detailed minutes on my printout.
I just scanned them. They look good. I'll make a motion if that's okay with you, Chair.
I'm okay with it.
All right.
Can we get a second to accept the minutes?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the minutes as printed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to hold Josh to good stuff today. So that's what we're going to be going in here, being positive. We're going to get some good stuff. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Josh because we did have some things that we wanted to get some updates on. But they have gone a step further and given us, or will be sharing some information about traffic fatalities, which I appreciate, them moving ahead on that. But we're going to cover the things that we had addressed. And I don't know, Commissioner Wright, is there somewhere that any of your concerns about the mail? Oh yeah, I see it. Okay, you're good. So you'll be ready for that piece. Okay, with that, I will turn it right over to Josh and we'll keep things moving.
All right, Chair Thornton, thank you. Good to be with everybody. First item up for discussion that we've been giving updates regularly to the Corridor Policy Committee on is the Median Plantings Master Plan, and both Central Services Director Andrew Saunders and Landscape Administrator Jeannie Connell are here. And we sent out kind of their 3 slides a couple days ago, and they're going to be walking us through those 3 slides. With that, I'll hand it off to y'all.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. Following last month's meeting, really kind of walked away with 4 things that you all were asking for. The first was an understanding of why plantings that were recommended by this body in March of 2020 were not in the ground. The second, or in the works. The second was an update, looking for an update on where we were with corridor plantings. Aligned with that would be a third goal of better understanding the initial and ongoing impacts of these beautification plantings. And then fourth, and perhaps most importantly, was to bring back a series of options that you all might consider for how we can continue to put things in the ground in line with that master plan. And so in a moment, Jeannie will walk us through an update of kind of a status report. But before we go, I am going to share my screen if that's okay. So I have here is the report that came out of committee in March of last year. That's where Jeannie was able to present the master plan to you all, identified various spaces around the community. And as a part of that discussion, there was a discussion of one-time costs, the initial cost for a truck and installation of plant materials and so on, and a discussion of annual operating costs. And so the committee made a recommendation that was accepted by the Mayor and Commission that included a reference to those costs in the FY21 operating budget. Full disclosure, I was aware that the committee had made these recommendations. I was also aware of some submittals we had in the budget process. I probably was not in tune with as well as I should have been about the intent behind this motion. And so in the FY21 budget, ultimately the Mayor and Commission approved a budget that unfortunately did not include the series of costs that are outlined here. But in an effort to kind of provide an investment in the future implementation of this plan, did include a one-time allotment of $75,000, which would be largely considered capital costs. So that is what's covered there, about half of that. And so in a little bit, I'll take you through the operating side of things. But when I was given this information about the $75,000, between our current staffing deficiencies associated with beautification plantings, and then you layer in coronaviruses and vacancy holds and so on, my first reaction, and one that I can back up a little bit and explain deeper, was it's not sustainable to go put $75,000 of landscaping in the community. So before we dive deeper on that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to ask Jeannie to give us an update on where we are with new and existing plantings. You're on mute. Okay.
Sorry, I started talking and I was muted. Anyway, good afternoon. To date, based on what was approved, on what Andrew was just describing, I have submitted for permitting and the design work to GDOT. It's a very slow process, as I have learned. The only responses I have received are for the areas on Atlanta Highway and 78. And I received another resubmittal request for those yesterday. So I'll be working on those this next week to get those sent out again. I have not heard anything back for the other areas. And based upon those resubmittals I received yesterday, I'm going to have some other corrections to make, especially with, I can see on Highway 441 and Timothy Road because of speed variances. So besides that, for our existing plantings, we have been able to install mulch out on Danielsville Road, do intense maintenance and pruning out on Timothy that was unable to be performed throughout the summer and fall because of reduced services because of labor and COVID. We are projected to be able to get Tallahassee reinstalled with mulch, and one other area. We're hoping to touch up and do some replantings on a lot of the crosswalks, especially out on Cedar Shoals and Timothy. That's where we're at right now.
And Jeannie, with the most recent feedback from GDOT, specifically, they have a plant height requirement. Can you talk a little bit about what you were told this time?
Yeah, I knew going into it we could not have anything exceeding 3 feet, and they're holding us to the table on that one. A lot of the drawings that we had done out around Lexington that was approved, I don't know, it was a different inspector. Some of those max heights on the plant material, they are not letting it go through now. So even if I get plant material in there that's less than 3 feet, I have to move everything in 22 feet from the edge of the roadway. So the original design, even for Highway 78, was 2 rows of plantings. Now we're having to merge it to the middle because we have to be within 22 feet of either side of the roadway.
Can I ask a quick question, Chair, if you don't mind, based on that? Mm-hmm. So 3 feet, I was just out at Epps Bridge over the weekend in front of Lowe's, and they've planted, goodness, probably about a dozen trees out there. How are they able to do it and we're not?
And where was this at?
This was in the median in front of Lowe's. They've planted a dozen. It looks like a dozen trees, and they're not crepes. I don't know what I mean. I don't know my trees, but I know they're not myrtles. But
I have no idea what Oconee County did with that. I don't know if they went through the process or not.
So it could be unpermitted plantings. The alternate is, in certain circumstances, GDOT will allow plantings taller than 3 feet, but they have to be significantly taller. So it's, for them, it's about maintaining that view through.
Yeah. Anything over 40.
But these are taller. I guess I would suggest somebody taking a look at that, because if they're able to do it, then we got to figure out how they did it and how we can replicate that. Because And I know you're going to get into ongoing expenses and stuff, but it seems to me something like that. I'm not the gardener that I like to pretend to be, but it seems like something like that is going to be less expensive to maintain. But maybe I'm wrong. But it just I would encourage somebody to take a look at that and figure out how they were able to do that.
We'll look into that.
Yeah, thank you. You'll see what I'm talking about. I was just there just last night, and
yeah, I saw it 2 days ago. I know there was brand new stuff right in the ground. And mostly like you're right, some kind of small tree is what it appears to be.
Yeah, but it's kind of a low. Am I right, Andrew, in saying like the limbs were lower to the ground, so it's not giving you that 3 feet sort of clearance. You see where I'm going?
I do, and we'll definitely look into it and see if they have a different permitting path or if they've permitted them at all. If there's something we can learn from that and implement in Athens, we certainly will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, if y'all are okay, so shared that packet.
Yeah.
Shared that packet.
I'm sorry, I was just thanking Jenny. All right.
So I'm going to share my screen one more time, if that's okay, to go through the second item that we shared with you. So we wanted to kind of review where we are, and this was a map that Jeannie helped put together where the yellow areas are all existing plantings. They can be pretty large plantings like we have on Epps Bridge, or they can be, the Tallahassee Roundabout or a crosswalk, but every one of those is a different maintenance level. And the green plantings are all from the master plan that you all previously approved, with the one variance that we've broken up Atlanta Highway between what we call the GDOT impact area that we're going to have to hold until the interchange is completed, and the other areas that are far away from that, where we could move forward as soon as permits are issued. And those are actually the ones that are currently underway. And so as we move into that, we've kind of broken this down. So the good news is through this effort that Jeannie's been doing, we've actually been getting cost from local vendors to both install and maintain planter areas. And that has aligned very closely with the tool that we shared with you. And so items A through J, the ones that are already in the ground, we can see when they were installed and about how much land area there is. And one of the things that I was trying to discuss last month was, unfortunately, there has not been any operational supplement associated with these. Now, there has been multiple requests in the budgeting process. We went back and looked at a Mayor and Commission work session presentation from 2018, and it's been a fairly consistent messaging that while these are low maintenance plantings, they are still significantly higher maintenance than existing grass that might be there. And so these operational costs have remained fairly consistent over time. And if we focus on this, you kind of look at blue as what would be private sector cost to be contracted, and green are in-house impacts. And so some of that work that Landscape is doing right now on Tallahassee and Danielsville Road with the mulching and such, unfortunately, that is coming at the expense of hazard tree maintenance. And if we look at the ultimate impact on mowing, it's put us between 1 and 2 weeks behind on mowing because we are now having to also maintain these areas on a different cycle. When we look down here at what's in the master plan, we can use the same methodology, but we also can tell you a little bit about the difference between the initial costs. So the initial cost, if it's contracted out, so far those Atlanta highway areas that are out to bid, they're coming in around $50,000. And then we could do that for about a third of that cost with the labor allocated to it. And then again, in that right column, you have the operational impact. So the big picture discussion is the same, which is it would cost a little over $20,000 a year to take care of all of these plantings in-house if 2 additional staff members were also added to take care of it. In the absence of that, we would be looking at about $170,000, $180,000 a year for contract care. And if neither of those were provided, what's going to happen is we're going to continue to get further and further behind on that mowing cycle.
Hello, Mr. Saunders.
Yes, sir.
Can you go back? You said $20,000 with 2 additional staff. Is that $20,000 included?
No, sir. So it's actually and I'll get to that in a second. It'll make more sense. If you were to add 2 staff and the operating impacts, it comes to just slightly over $100,000 of impact to the general fund budget. And the way that breaks down is you're a little less than 1 full-time staff member is required for what's in the ground, and a little more than 1 full-time staff member is required for what's in the master plan. So that's why we've tried to separate them a little bit visually here. And then on top of the staff, it's about the $20,000 in materials that would be involved in maintaining all of these areas in a given year. So before we go into options, are there questions or feedback about this approach?
Allison?
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks for this information. I feel like when we started this committee and when we were sitting in City Hall, we were very clear that would y'all tell us what you need to make this happen? And this chart is breaking that down quite frankly for us with that. If money wasn't an object, which I mean it always is, would you prefer this solution being an in-house one over out a contract?
When you look at the bulk of the work, we can do it more efficiently from an economic perspective than what we would pay the private sector. So the only time we would recommend contracting these services out of house is if we were just going to add a small segment of work and we were already whole in some regard. So if this was fully funded and the group was to come forward and say, hey, we want to go ahead and move forward with Jefferson Road, well, we're not going to add a full staff member for a little over 200 hours of care. So the approach there would be to contract that, and you kind of build those contracts a little bit over time, and eventually you would have the money to then consolidate to a staff member. And Jeannie, based off of the discussions last year and previous ones, I mean, I think the best solution, long-term, money is no object, is to actually have a dedicated crew that does corridors. But we have brought forward in this budget a more cost-effective option, which is to add these 1 or 2 crew members to existing one-person crews, which picks up on efficiency. And it just so happens these one-person crews are the ones that service most of these planters, both existing and proposed. So we believe that can be sustained. It's really when the community starts to think about things that are outside of the master plan that we might come back and say, okay, well, the good news is we don't necessarily need another staff member. What we need is the truck and a little bit of operating expenses so these 2 people can come together and become their own kind of enhanced planting maintenance crew.
Okay. All right. That really covers my question and some. It does sound like that there is some cross-training and ability with it being in-house. If something came up, you're able to utilize them in other areas. Or you're saying that, is that, I see you shaking your head. Is that?
Yeah, it's all of our landscapers tend to share a pretty broad skill set, with maybe the exclusion being advanced tree care. And so we do routinely pull people from one assignment to another, or we combine crews. It just depends on what the labor availability is at any given time. and what the work need is in the community. So for instance, when we're picking up these mulch assignments for the existing stuff in the ground, we might pull 2 or 3 crews that are otherwise spread out in the community mowing in a regular season to come help with mulch.
Gotcha. So it's seasonal shifts.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the answers.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this before we go to what the options moving forward look like? Okay, so the third page, and hearing from you all, what does it take to take action? We've taken a very unconventional approach, and this year in our budget, we have actually submitted 3 alternatives for the same initiative. We've submitted one proposal, which is this. It is 2 full-time staff members and some materials. We've submitted an alternate, which is this, which is 1 staff member and less materials. And we've submitted a please help us, we're drowning, which is this, which is just the materials cost. And what that really boils down to is kind of that Cadillac proposal is enough to take care of what we've got and implement the master plan. The stepped down proposal is enough to make us whole on the previous installations and get us back to a regular urban mowing cycle. And the emergency supplement is enough to make sure that we would still be behind on the mowing cycle, but the maintenance of the existing beautification would not come at the expense of tree care in our community. And so what we've done is we've looked at, well, what could you do based off of any one of those 3? And of course, the option of nothing, that nothing were to materialize in the budget. And based off of what Jeannie has told us, the non-interchange portions of Atlanta Highway are in the works. And so L is a given on every option. Atlanta Highway will be planted this spring, and we will absorb those operating costs until something is provided. So if we were to go with what has been the past history, Atlanta Highway will go in. That'll put us about 10 days behind on our urban mowing cycle, combined with the other impacts. And that means that in FY23, we would then be asking for around $70,000 to play catch up for what is all in the ground. Option 2 is a little bit of a pay it forward approach. This is the 2 grounds workers plus materials. With this, you get the most potential impact. So again, Atlanta Highway would go in this spring. We believe we could implement every other section except the Atlanta Highway interchange with the $75,000 that has been allocated, but that work would be done in fall of 2021 and spring of 2022. And we would then be on our regular 4 to 5 week urban mowing cycle. Understanding that we have a very tight budget and that what we hope may not always be true, there's another option here, which is the 1 staff member and catch up from previous stuff. With that, Atlanta Highway would go in the spring. We would use some of that staffing and so on to implement items K and O, which is Barnett Shoals and 441 from that master plan. That again would be done in the fall. So you're looking at fall, winter of 2021. To do that in-house would cost about $6,000 of materials because we would be providing the labor. That would leave this kind of war chest of $69,000 for future master plan implementation. But because we added both L and then K and O, we would be requesting around $28,000 in the next budget to provide contract services for that. Then this one this one we've discovered a new challenge, but let me walk you through it. Same model as before, 1 staff member plus some support. The idea was that we would try to move 1 additional installation forward this spring through a contract to get something in the ground with the sense of urgency of let's go. So if you were to plant something contracted out of that $75,000, we anticipate that actually your expenses would be higher than what's shown here. So if you look here, you look at it's about, both of these are around $44,000 of one-time cost if they were done in the private sector. As you get into the spring and summer, landscapers are going to charge you more for that same service, and that's for two reasons. First, they know the plant material is going to have a higher mortality rate, and they're going to have to come through and do the work twice. So they're going to price that in. Second is they're approaching their own busy season. And so where they might cut you a deal in January or February where they're otherwise slower, they might have to add staff or so on. And so we anticipate that if we were to contract one of those sites, it could be as much as $60,000 for the one-time cost. We would then do items K and O in the winter as proposed up here. That increases the amount of money that would be asked for in the next cycle. The challenge that Jeannie has reminded us of is that Georgia DOT has a stipulation that plantings be installed between October 15th and March 15th. So if it were the recommendation of this body that we take this approach for N or R, we would have to submit our paperwork as soon as possible and then kind of beat them up a little bit of, well, we're paying for it, we're taking the risk. If we put it in April or May, so be it. But I can't guarantee you that GDOT will allow it. And unfortunately, all of the master plan spaces are on some form of Georgia DOT property. Last but not least is that kind of bailout approach of we would get the money for materials maintenance from previous installations. We would then continue to run about 2 weeks behind on our mowing cycle. Item L would still move forward, but it actually increases, or it maintains a very high operating request into FY23. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure. And with this, I'll be quiet and we can take questions and feedback.
Chair, I have a comment, I guess. That's all right with you? Okay. She hadn't said anything, so I'm going to speak at my own peril. But yeah, it just seems to me to make sense that number 2 makes the most sense by the time you factor in the all the budget needs, future budget needs. I mean, and you're getting what you want. I mean, what is needed really out of it all. And I'll say this. I mean, it's $100,000, but one thing I've seen when, especially out at S Bridge, they have a nice landscaping thing out there at Frank Bishop's property. Looks real nice. I think it makes a good impression, a good first impression. And when we show that we're investing in our community, trying to make it look good, it's gonna pay off because other investments will follow along with that. I'm specifically thinking about, certainly along Atlanta Highway. And along our other main corridors where people are coming into town and seeing how things look, it is going to make that good first impression. So I think the investment that we make here will pay off for us down the line, hopefully sooner rather than later, and I think it will. So I'd certainly be in favor of asking for within the budget, the number 2, the full service support. For those reasons, among many of others, I just think it would be good for our citizens here and our residents in Athens as well. I would still though like to figure out. I mean, as you're looking at these prices, do try to figure out what it is they're doing in Oconee County. Maybe they're putting stuff out there that they didn't get permission for, but it's all along Mars Hill and it's all along the Epps Bridge there with the trees. So looking to see how they did it. Maybe we can do the same thing.
Commissioner, one thing that our Public Works Director has reminded me of is that portion of Epps Bridge in Oconee is not Georgia DOT.
I was probably thinking that might be the case, but
we will still connect with them and see what their experience is on landscaping projects.
Right. So at any rate, regardless, it seems like number 2 makes the most sense to me.
Andrew, I have a question when we're talking about number 2 or any of them. Well, number 2, and we're talking about Atlanta Highway. I know maybe 4 years ago, how far down are we talking when we talk about Atlanta Highway? Maybe that's the question, because you know, after it crosses, what is that? After it crosses that intersection, it turns into Broad Street. And there was a lot of conversation around the West Broad area of beautifying that corridor, which, like I said, it changes. It's the same route, but it changes its name. Has there been any thoughts? Maybe that conversation is over with that West Broad corridor.
Well, in a second, I'm going to ask Jeannie to tell us what all is specified in Atlanta Highway. I'll say that the last time I was a part of those conversations for West Broad, there was still discussion of a fairly significant roundabout at the intersection of West Broad and Plaza.
Yeah.
And if that roundabout is there, historically, when we've done roundabouts, we have done beautification plantings, and there's been some discussions about art and so on. That is where that's additive. So if that's not in the master plan, which I don't believe it to be, that would be the kind of thing in the future where we would piecemeal it in until it makes sense to either add a truck for the crew to pick up some more efficiency and they focus only on these areas, or we would just have a small contract where a small area is maintained so that we can maintain that urban mowing cycle. But Jeannie, can you tell us what all is covered in the Atlanta Highway sections?
Well, let me ask this too, Andrew, to make sure Jeannie can point this out. It's my understanding. Am I right in looking at this? Number 2 also covers areas beyond Atlanta Highway. It covers the whole master plan.
Correct.
It does.
Yeah.
Number 2.
It does. But Jeannie, can you talk a little bit about Atlanta Highway and what's...
Right. It starts on Huntington, that intersection there in front of the mall at Atlanta Highway, and goes over to the Timothy Bridge, Mitchell Bridge Road, and goes to medians. But Keith, if I'm not, and those are the parts we're talking about with the GDOT construction for the bridge you're working.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I was listening.
Okay. The bridge reconstruction on Atlanta Highway, that takes between Huntington and over to Timothy, correct?
Yes. Yeah. It takes about, yeah.
So, Commissioner Thornton, what I'm hearing is that I don't believe it extends further east than Timothy.
But there's a conversation to be had somewhere down the line, since we are talking about that roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a different conversation, but may need to include conversation about beautification. I know we went a lot about that roundabout. I don't even know where we are on it now, but yeah, okay, I'm good.
We're aware of similar conversations with GDOT on Prince Avenue near the hospital, where they're proposing to add some center islands with beautification, and it's the same thing. That's actually why we made that tool, is so at any time people can plug in space and see very quickly what the impacts are.
Thank you. Allison?
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, my question, when you were going back, you started your presentation or our discussions with minutes from our previous quarter. Was that March 2020? Or weren't we were shut down there, or did we get a meeting in before shutdown at City Hall?
March voting meeting was, that report went, I think, March 4th. It was approved by the full mayor and commission.
So that referenced budget stuff that didn't really happen in the way that it was voted at a committee, right?
Correct.
So is this the point Commissioner Hamby, were you identify that option number 2 to be in our minutes as something we vote on to move forward and be put into the budget cycle? We're kind of at that same point on this meeting to move what we as a quarter committee want to happen so that what we have been talking about is implemented, installed, and maintained.
I think that's where we are. And so I guess, Josh, help me out. If there's no more discussion or question, are we at a position to make a motion to recommend option 2 as a committee?
I do believe that. Yep, that's the next step, and I think then, kind of along those lines, whatever y'all vote on, I think is important that you track throughout the budget process here as we go. And so I think that's something that we make sure we all keep communicating about it as the budget gets finalized, and y'all have more and more meetings about the budget.
Yeah, and I kind of think that's where we may have dropped, and I'm not blaming anybody, but that's maybe where we dropped the ball last time, is not looking at that closer during the budget. So,
Well,
and nobody, I'm not blaming anybody for that, but it's just the way it worked. I mean, it was a chaotic time. So,
well, I was going to do a little flashback on just how chaotic everything was and how hard it was for everybody to keep up with everything that was going on, especially those of us who were under re-election too. Mike, there were a lot of extra stress. So Mike, are you making a motion?
yeah, I'm sorry, I walked away for a second. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll make.
Your comments were not that important, Allison.
No, I heard you. I had the volume up really loud. I can hear it all over the house. It's got this Sonos going. I can hear everything. So, yes, I'll make a motion to accept recommendation number 2.
I'll second that to move forward out of committee and whatever process to get it into the budget and us keep track of it so we can explain it. Appreciate it.
It's been motion and second that we will move forward, whatever the next steps are on option number 2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, Mike done walked away again. Those opposed, it's been passed unanimously. One question, Josh, when we're talking about moving this towards the budget process, do we have to do anything with the total commission, or that would be part of the budget discussion? There doesn't have to be another something from the larger commission, right?
I don't think so, but I can get back to you on that, Commissioner Thornton. I think, Central Services has this in their departmental budget request, and so this, we were, as Andrew said, he had multiple options in there, so we can make sure what y'all recommended is in there. And so, as we get through the departmental phase and the mayor brings his budget to y'all, I think that's when we have that conversation to see if it's in there, and then y'all make your recommendations at that point if it's not. I think that's kind of, but at this point, we're still a little early in it. And what I can do is I can share y'all's vote, and I can ask what's the best way to formalize that. So I'll get back to y'all on that.
Okay, and I would appreciate it as it's moving forward, just if it's an asterisk or whatever you put behind this topic, voted unanimously out of quarter committee.
Yep, exactly. And
just making sure that follows with it. Thanks for letting us know how that goes.
For sure. And I think what we've learned, this time around is we'll update y'all all along the way. So you'll hear from us kind of where it's at in the process, and we can keep that communication loop going. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to keep things moving. That was a very productive presentation. Thank you, Andrew, and who else gave comment? Thank all of you. Now we're going to move on to item number C, and I'll turn it over to Josh.
Sure thing. Before I introduce Keith, I just wanted to share y'all had asked about the roundabout, and Keith can speak a little bit to that too if y'all want, and answer any questions if you have. But it's still on track. The West Broad at Hancock roundabout, and GDOT's reviewing the concept, and beautification should be included in that. But Keith's here, and if y'all want to get into that as well, we can. But Keith's here to share about the corridor user groups. So with Atlanta Highway, Lexington Highway, and Prince Avenue, and he's going to give a brief update as he does at every meeting to kind of keep you all up to date.
Sure. Thank you, Josh, and good to be with y'all at the committee. So let me first touch on Atlanta Highway and Lexington. We did get for those two corridors, the public engagement survey online is out. It's on the web and published. We did get some comments about the survey itself from both the user group and outside folks. So we are making some modifications to the survey that's online. It doesn't change answers or responses that anybody's already given. But every time somebody new looks at it, if we make a change, they'll see the new version. So we're fixing some wording changes that got brought to our attention. There's some voting issues with the software. And this is a software tool that the county has that we've been using, and it has worked pretty good for our surveys. I think this is one of the first times we've tried to use it with a large group of projects where we were asking people to rank the projects in their order of priority to give the user group some information, and then so we could convey that back to you as part of the public's ranking on that. So that has not, that part of the survey has not worked as well as we went through it multiple times in our group and looked at it and we tested it. And I guess we were so close to it, it looked like it was working to us, but retrospect, getting some people on the outside to look at it, they brought some deficiencies in the way that presented itself. So we have made some modifications to the survey already so that it's not asking the people to rank all 20-something projects at one time. It shortens the ranking to by project type. And we're also looking at a different survey tool and software to provide that option to rank all the projects, but do it in a way that's a little more intuitive and doesn't. What we have now automatically fills in some blanks. If you vote for priority on one project, it fills in the blanks on the others. And that may or may not be what the person doing the survey wants to happen. Unfortunately, that's just a function of the software we have today. So we're getting some other, looking at some other software that we use from some other surveys and see if we can't get that going a little better. So I know that's, been a concern. But we heard the complaints. We have already made some edits on the wording that came in. So there were a couple of errors, some typos. Joseph and GIO has already fixed those, and then he's also working on some other. I'll go with those and see if there's any other questions or comments on those two surveys.
Just a quick one, if you don't mind, Keith.
Sure.
So when do you anticipate sort of the final product survey being? Just because
Yes, sir. We're working on revising it right now. In fact, even while I was on the meeting, I got a couple of drafts for that. So the goal is to have a revision to the survey by early next week at the absolute latest, maybe even as early as end of day tomorrow. But we're working on it as fast as we can.
Okay.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit because I'm reading the agenda and I really thought it was, and maybe it wasn't spelled out. Are we talking about surveys based on just the user groups? Is this what we're talking? We're not talking about the other areas that were up for conversation.
What we have out right now is the T-Splost has the two projects, the Atlanta Highway and the Lexington Highway. Well, there's multiple, but for those two, those are T-Splost projects. And the user group had presented to Mayor and Commission a list of projects, and Mayor and Commission approved that big, long potential list of projects. And now we've going back to the public for asking for their input on the priority ratings. And then we'll bring that list back to Mayor and Commission for y'all to approve or make changes on what you say the priorities are for those, and then that's how we'll spend the T-Splosh money. Then we'll go in design and get those going for those two corridors.
Is it possible, just for information, that we can see the survey that is being sent to people?
Yes, ma'am. It's online.
It's already on. I thought you had to do something final to it.
Well, we thought we were final. The user group had reviewed it and staff had reviewed it, and we liked it. We thought it was working. We've published it. It's online. It's up and running. But we have heard some comments and complaints about it. So we are revising it, but it's still up there. We can still get comments while it's up there.
Okay.
And our changes won't void those comments. It's just, we'll take comments on what's up there until the day we change it, and then we'll take comments of the new survey, but they'll all work together. We're not going to be voiding anybody's earlier comments.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
And I'll hit Prince real quick, but I just wanted to hit the survey part first, and then I'll Prince.
Well, right. I just was clicking on it. I appreciate this survey being on the front panel of the website, and that you're modifying it without changing the ability to merge round 1 surveys with round 2. I see that it's going to be up for input until April 18.
Yes,
and then
ma'am.
it goes back to the user group, and then we'll get sort of a summary of that.
That's right.
That point. Is that the plan?
Yes, ma'am. You'll get all the comments will be available to Mayor and Commission. I mean, you'll get to see all of the unfiltered data as much as you want, but the user group will go through those, and the user group will create a recommendation to you for what they think the priorities of the project should be.
Right.
And then that comes back to you for ultimate decision.
Okay.
And we're going to follow a very similar process with Prince Avenue if we're moving it forward. So the good part is Atlanta and Lexington, at least some of these things that we're working out of the kinks out there, hopefully we won't have them as we continue going forward. Prince Avenue user group has been meeting every 2 weeks and looking at potential projects. Particularly, they focused in these first few meetings. There is a GDOT safety improvement project that's coming that GDOT's already approved their project concept for Prince Avenue that includes improvements to all the intersections. It's got some medians, putting some raised medians in sections, some mid-block crossings. And so the user group, because that project is going so fast with GDOT, the user group is focused on things they might want to bring back to you to request to add to that GDOT project, because to stay on schedule with GDOT, we need to get that back in their hands quickly. So they've been looking at that, but they've also just been looking at other improvements, just like the groups did for Atlanta and Lexington. And we expect to have that list back to you for Prince probably in the next month or so.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Keith. But anybody else?
You're welcome.
Allison, did you have another question for Keith? Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I see that the next Prince Avenue meeting is March the 10th.
Yes, ma'am.
So if anybody's interested in attending, I'm going to put on my calendar. Okay. What next, Josh? Josh,
Yes.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm sitting on needles and pins to hear about Jefferson and Nowhere Road and all of that. I'm sitting on needles and pins now.
Well, that's the last item on the agenda. So yeah, well.
Wait a minute. No, we're going to rush through the mailboxes.
No, we're not. We're not. No.
Let's hurry up before the chair loses her item.
That's right. So
Time.
Commissioner Wright, did you want to share first, or do you want Bruce Lonnie from planning to share first?
I want you guys to tell me what you learned and share it with everybody.
All right. So just in introducing Bruce, we wanted to thank Commissioner Wright for beginning the research and getting out there and finding some examples. And Bruce is going to share what we've learned so far and kind of where we're at in the process.
Thank you, and I appreciate having the chance to talk with y'all. So working with Brad on this initial conversation about mailbox safety and trying to dig in a little deeper on the two roadways that were specifically mentioned, Grand Ellen Drive and West Hancock Avenue. Planning staff went ahead and looked in the field to see what sort of things we have going on. But before we did, we had a communication with our local postmaster to reestablish some communication. We work with them regularly on addressing. This was the first time we'd had a discussion in a while about delivery policies and mailbox locations and those types of things. So Michael Benevento is our local contact, our local postmaster, and he's been extremely responsive. So we're very thankful for that. Folks with federal agencies aren't often that quick to reply, so we're happy about that. So we did some field work last Thursday, and two of our staff went out on West Hancock and Grand Ellen and did some initial survey mapping of the situation, did some field analysis, and then we pulled together those things into a memo with some maps that we shared with the postmaster. And you've received, they have those, Josh, every week?
No, if they're interested, we can send them out now, but I didn't know if they wanted that level of detail, but we can definitely share it.
Well, let me just describe real quickly, and then we can get this to you should you want it. We're still waiting to hear back from the postmaster, so maybe it's worthwhile to hear their response, and then we can put it all into one package. But here's what we found. And looking at West Hancock Avenue, the only section of that right-of-way from the grid of downtown all the way to the terminus of West Hancock that has the described problem of having mailboxes on the opposite side of the street from residences is on the section that is south of Broad. So that's where we did our survey work. And so on that south of Broad section, we had 23 total addresses. Of those 23 total addresses, we had a variety of mailbox configurations. We had some shared posts. We had some missing posts. But we had 5 addresses that had to cross the street to get their mail. We'll talk about each of these corridors, I think, not together but separately, just because they are slightly different. Posted speeds on West Hancock's 25 miles an hour. It is not a through street. It has some kinks to it. Has some moments that are sort of steep and might have some sightline issues. But it is a local street. So it is only meant to carry local traffic. We have not observed, it's not a very useful cut through. So it's really just the folks who live in that area that are using that section of West Hancock. What was interesting was the mailboxes were not oriented perpendicular to the street, but parallel. And so it provided kind of a practical answer for finding refuge. So if you're standing and opening your box, you're not standing with your back to traffic or standing on the edge of asphalt, you're standing next to the post, which was not something we anticipated seeing, but it was an interesting practical solution that I think maybe the residents over there have figured out on their own. We didn't have any atypical mailboxes. That was one of the things we were looking for. If we're going to relocate mailboxes, if this turns out to be something that we can take action on, providing cost considerations on that. If somebody has a masonry mailbox on one side, it's reasonable to assume they'll want the same mailbox on the other side. Everybody over there had a pretty standard wooden post, standard mailbox. The key thing there was that we had 5 out of 23 that had the observed condition, the safety issue, and that parallel instead of perpendicular arrangement for the boxes was kind of interesting. For Grand Ellen, we have a slightly different situation. We've got a kind of winding street, also relatively narrow, posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour. The road width is somewhat narrow. It's 20 feet of pavement, which is a little bit less than you normally would see, but you see that typically on some of our older in-town roadways. There are no sidewalks. So as opposed to West Hancock that has sidewalk on the side with the mailboxes, Grand Ellen does not. The other thing that's different about Grand Ellen is it's not just for local traffic, because it is an access point to Memorial Park. There is reason for folks who don't live in the area, who aren't familiar with the surroundings, to be using that roadway. So we could understand where the safety issue kind of was coming into play. There were 29 total addresses. Of the 29, 13 addresses had to cross the street to get their mail. So a much higher percentage than we had on West Hancock. We only had one mailbox that wasn't your typical kind of construction, but all of the mailboxes are more like we're used to, where they open towards the travel lane, exacerbating that safety concern, I think. Most everybody had their box right across the street from their house, but there were two that you had to kind of go down across the street and down, and that added an extra layer of complexity to it. So all of that to say, I think planning staff understood the reason for the request. The challenge is going to be working through the Postal Service policies and procedures to know what to do next. With these things being in the right-of-way, they're not on private property. The mailbox themselves is federally regulated for how it can be used and how it can be placed and the heights and all that sort of good stuff. So what we've communicated to Michael Benevento and his team are really 5 basic questions. We're asking him to evaluate USPS policies and procedures for the existing mailboxes. What do we have going on there now? What those same policies and procedures might be for relocating. What are the options for relocating? What is the cost consideration for an owner versus a non-owner? You know, the Postal Service is not going to pick up the tab, but maybe there is something else in there that we can do some cost sharing somehow. Assignment of responsibility. We've got early indicators that this is largely going to be on the property owner to work through, but because it's in the right-of-way, we know the Public Works Department is also going to have to be coordinated with on this too. And then just an open-ended question. What are the other logistical considerations they've had to run into in other communities in sorting through this kind of problem? And his team, when I mentioned that there's a team, he's got folks from all over the Southeast that are on this email. So he's pulling together his resources in a way that I really appreciate and was sort of not anticipating. He got this information on Monday, and I was hoping, Josh was hoping that we'd hear something back for today's meeting. Haven't heard anything yet. I have placed a call. So hopefully we'll hear something in the next few days. But we did hit him with a lot of data. And given that he's got 3 or 4 other people to communicate with, it may take him a minute. But I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've seen and done so far.
I really appreciate you going back to those examples that I walked, and you could appreciate I remember the one going, it's not even across the street. I got to go walk down to even find the mailbox. Yeah. And so I guess part of what you saw on the West Hancock was the fact that when we added the sidewalk, we, I guess, with the sidewalk funding, did put their mailboxes in. I mean, part of that project, you can see it on Magnolia right now. I walked that one at the same time, and you could see the old mailboxes were there while construction was happening. And then just the other day, I saw that a good bit of them got new mailboxes in the process. Could be that they didn't survive the construction part. So whatever we're doing right now, when we put the mailboxes back on the wrong side during our construction, I'm not sure that they need to know that detail, but I'll be curious at our next meeting to learn how it is that we're appropriating that and how we are communicating with these people about their mailboxes and their preference. And, oh, gee, we broke it. Is it okay? Because you can see those newer ones, they all look alike. And like you say, the orientation, that happened also on Lumpkin when they put the new sidewalk in there, moving them parallel to the road. I think the only other comment's likely going to come from Mike, because I thought we had a high-speed corridor like Timothy that was also an example we wanted to learn about. Mike, you with us?
I'm here. Yeah, Timothy has a few of them on the stretch that goes. Yeah, Goodness, it's right near McNutt's Creek on down to around that area there. So
on the side where it's not Stroud, it's
I'm drawing a blank, Bruce. It's on.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about. I know
right, right as you're going toward the almost near the bypass there.
Yeah.
And if there's a stretch of rural road too, that could be maybe the fourth example. If we do a stretch of potentially Timothy and a stretch of road that's a little more rural. That was one thing y'all had mentioned, but we didn't get any examples of. So just
well, and I guess I didn't know I was supposed to give an example because clearly, rural for me would be Smoky Road coming down to Helicon Springs. That would definitely, because I have walked that during campaigning. All the mailboxes are on one side of the street, and there's no sidewalks. So that would be a good example of rural in my district.
All right.
And Patrick, we're hearing a whole lot about Moore's Grove with the Firefly Trail, and that's one for. But it sounds like we have another rural one, but and that would probably capture two different speeds versus the 25-mile-per-hour one that we have here. And I would like the way you've outlined what you're talking to them about, and if the data for this could be. It might have to be separate just by virtue of the rural and the urban side, because there's not sidewalks. And Mike, is there sidewalks in the example you just brought forward? No,
there's not.
Yeah, so that would also.
No, there's definitely not.
Yeah.
With an explanation point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Bruce, you always give us good information. We may not like to hear it sometime, but you bring us good information, and I thank you. Anybody else have any other questions on this item? Okay, Josh, I'm going to turn this over to you to follow the agenda, but it is now 3 minutes after 3, and I've tried to maintain our minutes till an hour. So I'm going to suggest, because we're not going to leave here until I hear about the areas that I'm concerned about. Now, either we're going to talk about the areas I'm concerned about, because I think Steve Decker, yes, Steve is there, is on here. So I'm going to leave it up to the commission. Do y'all want to stay on a little longer, or do I need to move F to E or E to F? Are y'all okay with staying on another 15 minutes or so?
I think it will be 10 minutes through both. So I think we can do E and F in 10 minutes. But if that, whether that helps or not.
I'm good with that. And I think our minutes from that last meeting, we went to 3:20. So we're still ahead.
Okay. Well, y'all give me some brownie points for keeping us with, not on here all night here. Okay, we're good. Let's roll.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Thornton. So E and F, what we'll do is we'll kind of combine the two. So Lieutenant John McIlvain has joined us from the police department. We're really excited to have him today, as well as TPW Director Steve Decker. And they've been working together. So, kind of the discussion around traffic fatalities is tied to the conversation around safety corridors. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lieutenant John McIlvain, and he's going to give a quick update on kind of what we're seeing in 2021.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. As you're all well aware, this year we are having a significant increase in the number of fatal crashes that we've observed based or compared to prior years. We've had 7 so far year to date. 6 of them our agency's work, and then 1 Georgia State Patrol work. The GSP crash that they worked was a result of an Oconee County vehicle pursuit. So historically, over the last 5 years, at this point in the calendar year, we've generally only seen, on average, 1 fatal car crash. So having 7 so quickly in the year is obviously very concerning. But we are in a strange time here in the COVID pandemic that we're working in. We've seen a significant decrease in vehicle crashes overall on the roadway. From 2019 to 2020, we've seen about a 23% drop in vehicle crashes that we work. And conversely, we've seen an increase in serious injury crashes. From 2019 to 2020, we've seen a 26% jump in serious injury crashes. We're very lucky that in 2020 we didn't see a jump in fatal car crashes, but we are realizing it this year. And the reasoning behind it still requires a little bit further study, but I've been doing a little bit of reading about nationwide trends with regards to car crashes. Nationwide, the number of car crashes on the roadway is going down, but the severity of injury as a result of those crashes is going up. So what's happening in Athens-Clarke County is not off pace with what we're seeing as a nationwide trend. And so I'm glad that we're here to be able to talk about those things in order to try to get us back and below what our historical averages have been.
Great. Thanks, Lieutenant. I appreciate it. And so kind of how that connects to what Steve's working on. Steve's been looking at data to help inform the potential locations of safety corridors. And so, Steve, you want to jump in from there?
Yes, sir, I will. I'm going to share something while I'm talking. It takes a couple minutes for it to pop up. Let's see if it'll come up right. And it didn't. That makes a lot of sense. I'll stop sharing. I can talk about it. And like Josh said, we had a few meetings with the police department, sheriff, and the police chief. Very positive meetings. Talked about the safety corridors. And I do want to, before I get into that, for Commissioner Thornton, I would like to tell you that we do have traffic counters sitting out on Nowhere Road, Biddard Road, and Danielville. And we went out and said several. We're collecting data. We're in the process of collecting crashes as well. And so I don't have a report for you other than that we are working on it. And I talked to the technician today. And sorry, my phone acting up. And we are working on it, and he will be picking up next Wednesday. We'll have the data, and we'll be putting together.
Steve, may I jump in here, man? You said Nowhere Road, Biddard Road. You said?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And what was the other one?
Danielsville.
No Smoky Road. No Smoky
no, ma'am.
Road?
You did not ask me about Smoky, but
oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me put that on your list. I thought I got that one covered. Add that one to your list, okay?
We'll do that, and I can add that. You. We have one technician, and that poor gentleman has been round the clock setting counters and collecting data. He's also an analyst. So not only does he set them, he does the analysis as well. Bless his heart. He's been very, very busy. And having said that, I'd like to go over with you. You've heard about the 3 fatalities that happened out on Tallahassee. And it did alarm us, okay? And so this is what I'm fixing to go over with you, and I'm sorry I can't share it, go over with you is how we would go about doing all the pre-work for a corridor, safety corridor, okay? And we're going to do this, all that we're looking at, we're going to do this same thing. And so what I did is I put together a list starting in February. We pulled all the crashes. We're going to do an in-depth review. And in March, we're going to collect all the traffic data, which will be already scheduled. And we're going to assemble the roadway safety audit team, which includes the lieutenant as well. We have a great staff for that. And they're going to actually discuss what we're doing and schedule a trip. We're going to use a transit. It's going to provide a small bus for us. We're going to drive the thing, make many stops, and do a very complete roadway safety audit. Once we get that done in March and April, we're going to look at what they've done. We're going to assess any physical improvements that need. As you know, we do in the roadway safety audit team, there's some simple ones like sign and marking. There may be some minor intersection or safety improvements we need to make. And there may be some that need to come to the American Commission to schedule a project. So we're going to be looking at all of that. And then, of course, in April, we come to a work session to explain to you where we are. This one will probably go together with all the other ones we're going to bring to you about the safety corridors. But we are working on that. We just had our map updated. Stephen Bailey's been working with our intern, has got that updated. We have some really good data. We can pull every piece. But the key to this whole thing is, and the meeting we had with the police chief was the key, we now have a real strong team looking at this. And we're going to move to the next level to bring a PIO in, and we're going to be sitting at tables and looking at this. We have to really dig into this deep if we're going to make a difference. So that's kind of where we are. If that, I'm open for any questions you might have.
Anybody, ladies and gentlemen, any questions from the commission? Thank you, Steve. I'm waiting to see the outcome of the data with the speed areas that you put in check, and I'm going to ask, how soon do you think we could do the speed limit thing on Smoky Road? I'm sorry, I missed that one, and that is my fault. How soon can we look at add Smoky Road to this?
As he picks up the counters on Wednesday, he can reset some for that. I'll ask him to include that.
Okay.
So I'll get it as soon as I possibly can. Yes, ma'am.
So when we meet again, what kind of information? And it is all right, let me back up. I think that the officer John McLevine mentioned about the 7 fatalities. Is there any reason why we're having this high of fatalities? Is there any explanation? This seems to be really unusual.
And I'm not going to take the lieutenant's thunder, but several of these are DUI. And Lieutenant, if you please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Let me get so for the 7 this year, you're looking at several that were pending test results on to confirm that they're DUI, but there's 3 that are strongly suspected right now. 2 on Tallahassee Road and 1 at Danielville and Nowhere.
And I would expect, and I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but people have gone through a lot of mental stresses and strains. And it sounds like if we're having these based on DUI, I don't know if there's any scientific thing that we can relate to, but we've seen some unusual behaviors because of COVID. So I'm just, that's me talking just off the top of my head there. But yeah, if we can move that sign, Steve, to Smoky Road, I would appreciate it. So the next meeting, you will give us a report on what your findings were in those 4 areas. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll do my best. I'm going to pull the crashes too, because it's critical to look at the vehicle crashes versus the speed to see the correlation. And I also want to look at not only do I look at the speed, I look at the type of vehicles on the roadway. And you said something that we've just talked about several times about the pandemic. It has having some impact on people. And I have it in my family. My wife was a teacher. She had to quit. And so she's been going through a few things. So not as drastic as some, but I believe that is true. But looking at the crashes, we can see causation, better causation. I was trained in crash reconstruction as a traffic engineer. And so I'm taking our traffic engineer, Tim Griffith. He and I are going to dive deep into these crashes and go beyond the initial cause and see what the other causes might be. So we're going to do some very, very in-depth crashes. We're going to do this on all of the possible corridors that we bring to you for potential safety corridors. That's our plan. The better data we have, the better solutions we can come up with. So that's kind of what I want to do.
Well, I definitely don't want to ask questions that we don't have enough data or information, but I do think this will open up another conversation when we meet next month. So thank you, Steve. Steve, I'm going to send you a letter from a constituent off of Smoky Road that you may or may not want to follow up with, but I'll send it to you, okay?
Yes, ma'am, I'll follow up. And I would like to commend the lieutenant. He has gone over and above on a lot of things helping us. I know he's got a busy schedule, but I would like to commend him for his help. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's going to take all of us working together. Josh,
Yes,
we have made the 317 mark, which is not bad. I'm just wanting to summarize what I took away from this meeting, and Josh, you chime in. We as the committee, we're going to recommend option 2 on the master plan as far as budget. Josh will get back and see if there's any glitches. The survey on T-Splosh is online. I would suggest, especially in those corridors, Lexington and Atlanta Highway, we let our residents know about this survey so we can get a broader input. Even though they're making changes, as Keith said, I think the information is valuable, but if nobody's responding or the same folk are responding. So I would really suggest that we figure out how people can know that they need to check it out. And the next thing on the mailboxes, I do want to thank Bruce working with the Postal General in this area. And I think the questions that Bruce left us with was he's asking for the General to investigate the current policies, what are other options, and cost and logistics, which just seems like, the next step for where we are trying to get to. And I'm very disturbed that we've had 7 fatalities, but I'm glad that we're looking at not just checking them off, but that Steve is looking at a correlation of these fatalities in the different areas. I appreciate that Nowhere Road and Danielsville and Pitter Road are getting the attention that they've kind of missed in the past. And I appreciate moving on to Smoky Road. That's my takeaway. If anybody else has anything, we're good. Josh, we're good.
Well, we are good.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Can we get a second?
Second and third.
Wait a minute. Commissioner Wright had a finger up.
Well, just in follow up, we had talked about meeting monthly so that we can keep the momentum going. And I was hoping we could avoid the 4th week and maybe move us to the 3rd Thursday. Josh might have the bigger load on that if it. So LRC is no longer on the 3rd Thursday, which opens it up, but not for you, Josh.
GOC is, I think, still we got the chair on the line here, Chair Hamby of the GOC. So I think the GOC will be meeting on the 18th at 5 is what I think for March.
Is that too much for you guys to have both of them on the same day?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do it. Yeah, if it works for y'all.
Let's do it. And
well,
just
Patrick's on there too, so I don't want to talk for him, but
no, 2:00 Thursdays are fine.
Okay. On the 3rd. And then by looking at the calendar, I just want everybody to think ahead. In March, we have a 4th Tuesday and a 5th Tuesday. It's just a little breathing room in our calendar.
And we need to breathe.
And we need it. We need it real. So thank you. And I'm ready to vote to adjourn.
Been a motioned and second by Patrick and Commissioner Hamby. All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Thank everybody.
We did it 3:21. We made it before last.
Yay! And we got something done.
Oh yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.